just me and you talking, so to speak.
All music that is truly derived from African heritage contain that unique ancient wail of the soul, that shout, that release, that unabashed cry of the heart which links us with our brothers and sisters of the past. Now, some will say it's caused by environmental and social factors, whatever. However and wherever, for me, its essence must be tapped. You can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And waiting is the spirit of ages that is and always will be the ancient source.
Good evening. My name is Roberta Ridley, Chairwoman of the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne, and joining me as usual, our ride and die historian of that society, Mr. Adrian Wells. And good to be back on set. How about that, huh?
Yes.
A lot going on, a lot of things happening in the country, a lot of things happening in the city, a lot of things happening in our lives. And genealogy is still a pertinent entity for discussion, to share, to educate, to have a discussion. And so today, what we would really like to do is just have a general conversation about some different things as far as genealogy is concerned, hoping that we will possibly titillate individuals' thought processes where they might have questions that they failed to ask, didn't know to ask. And maybe we'll throw something out there that will remind you that you needed to ask these questions and that you can get in touch with us with the African American Genealogical Society to assist you with that. So we're going to see how you make the records talk. What do you look at in order to get those records to talk, that sort of thing. Adrian is going to share some research items that he has that maybe you don't have and should have, and you should also make sure that we share how to go about it. And then we also want to always incorporate history with our genealogy, actual day-to-day history, if you will, in terms of what has happened and where you should look for that information, particularly if you have an individual that's missing in the common documents that we refer to when we're talking about it. So we're talking about those type of things. For example, and always, we want to always talk about censuses. And censuses that were taken from 1790 up through now what is currently available to people in public records 1950. Doesn't mean you can't get anything beyond that, but it's a little bit different because they're not easily accessible online. Because if you're doing genealogy, you're familiar with Ancestry.com and Family Search, which is from the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And that one is a free site to go in and look at. Ancestry.com, you do have to have a paid subscription for it, but both of those you can access here at the Allen County Public Library. And we do a lot of work out of the Allen County Public Library, helping people find their information and building information to share with you and other individuals, programming and such. So we know, and this is just kind of, like I said, this is a nice conversation this evening on how to make those records talk to you about what you're looking for as far as your family history, genealogy, and all the other little out-of-the-box references that you could go to learn what you need to learn. 1790 being the first federal census that was taken shortly after the Revolutionary War, and with that having taken place, it was like the first time there was a, so to speak, legal count. That doesn't mean that in certain localities there were state censuses that were taken prior to the 1790 federal, there were territorial censuses that were taken as well. But the federal census start in 1790. We go on every 10 years. The censuses are taken, and for people who are beginners, they don't know this, and other individuals that think that they knew or know but hadn't actually done a lot of research in this. So every 10 years. So we go from 1790 to 1800, 1810, 1820, 1830, 1840, 1850, 1860, and then things change a little bit. We get into the censuses that come after the Civil War. But in those older records, they must be looked at in order for us to understand the social lifestyle of both the enslaver and the enslaved. The records only show primarily the white individuals who were counted, and they did a name count, gender count, and they would also show how many enslaved persons they had in their, so to speak, employ. And those would show up on those records with simply tick marks, not talking about the names of the enslaved individuals. And we're moving forward from 1790, as I said, up to 1860, which is just prior to the Civil War. But we do find from time to time that there are individuals listed in those censuses who are of African origin and or mulatto from the marriages or ownership in a different classification. Perhaps they were fortunate enough or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, indentured servants, and or they were here already and had land and a profession that they were nurturing when the European people began to arrive in these United States. So you may find people of color, you will find people of color. Whether or not you'll find your ancestors is slightly debatable, and for the most part, not. So that's from 1790 up through 1860. The information varies, the layout of the censuses look different, and because we want to cover a lot of stuff and kind of have a conversation about some other things, we're going to not do visuals, so to speak, as far as what those records actually look like, right? So I guess to summarize, my portion of the censuses, 1790 up through 1860, primarily does not include African Americans unless they are listed as an indentured slave or a free person of color owning land or property in the colonies during that time. And then things change, right? Mm-hmm. Tell them how it changes.
Well, the 1870 census is the first census to list people of color by name. So this was the first census that you will find people of color listed by name, other than if they were a free person of color, like Roberta said, like in the 1860, 1850, 1840, 1830 census. They would not have been listed unless they were free people of color. So 1870 was the first census to list people of color by name. And with the 1870 census, a lot of people, they make the mistake of thinking that just because the people are listed in that household that they are related, but it takes further research to prove that so. But it is the first census that people of color are listed by name. And like on the 1870, there's no relationship listed, it's just who in the household, so there's no relationship, so you don't know the relationships between the people in the household. So that's why I said you have to do some further research. But in 1880, The next census is the census that will list the household, and then it'll list everyone in the household, their relationship to the head of the household. So you will get relationships in 1880, and you can compare that from the 1870 to the 1880 census. And then 1900 census, this census has a lot of information. With any census, you want to make sure that you're looking at the top portion of the census to see what those columns are, because it's going to give you a lot of information. Like the 1900 census, in this census, you're going to get, if there's a couple, you're going to get the number of marriages they may have had. With the woman, it's going to list how many children, she's a mother of how many children, and how many children are living during that census. So that's one thing that I always go to the 1900 and 1910 census to look for. Like, okay, how many kids does she have? So if I know if I'm going through the census and the children ain't adding up, so I'll be like, where are those other kids? So that's important there. And then each census after the 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, 1950, they're all going to have different information. So like I said, you want to make sure that you're looking at those top columns and going down to see what it means. And I think in 1900, I think this is the one that asks if the person was a Civil War veteran.
Correct.
Yeah. So if you see, looking at that 1900 census, you go across and you say that's checked that person was a Civil War veteran, then you have some other research to be doing, and you want to find that person's pension record if they have one, because it's going to give you a wealth of information. But not all, you're not going to find that information a lot, because I know some of my Civil War ancestors in the 1900 census, that box wasn't checked for them, even though they were Civil War veterans. I'm trying to see what.
1890.
Huh?
1890.
Oh yeah, the 1890. This census was destroyed by fire, and there is a little bit portions of it that did survive, but it's just for a very sparse areas. I think Alabama is one of the states that has a little bit of the 1890.
One of the few states.
Yeah, one of the few states that has remnants of the 1890. But then there's also the 1890 veteran schedule.
Right.
So if you can't find the 1890, you can maybe try to piece them together if your ancestor was a veteran with the 1890 veteran schedule.
It's interesting because in the various researches that we've done to assist individuals, we do find maybe there's a write-up in the local newspaper or the Tri-County newspaper about an individual who has served in the military, but when you go in, talk about following up on the information, like you find it on that 1900 census that they were a Union or Confederate soldier. And from an African American perspective, please don't be alarmed if you should find that an African American soldier is a Confederate soldier. They could be a Confederate soldier for a very strange number of reasons, and not necessarily voluntarily a soldier. They were used to substitute white soldiers who their parents didn't want their boy to go into the service, and so they would substitute their son serving by using one of the enslaved people on their plantation. And therefore, that person would be in the military as a Confederate soldier, and during that time, and primarily, were not allowed to carry a weapon, of course, which mean that they were primarily in servitude to some level while in the Army or in serving in the Navy or what have you, because those were all segments of military service during that time. So what Adrian mentions is very valid in terms of you may or may not find them in the records like that, but there is some information out there. Make sure of that. And if you can find something that documents them having served, you should pursue it. and you can get that through the National Archives. Those military records help us identify individuals in 1890, as Adrian spoke, that may not show up in a regular federal census. I think, and we want to touch on these things because that's where it all starts. That's where it all starts for you to start building a case for your research. And also because as you're looking at the census, it gives you locality. Do not be staggered by the fact that they're not right where you think they should be, because what you know about may be from your family story or reunions and things like that, where this person was in Mississippi or Alabama or Arkansas, but in 1860 or 70, they might have been in Georgia. They might have been in Florida. They might have been in Tennessee. So following the records is very, very significant, and you have to be willing to put in some time to get the story right. Do not disregard the family story, but always try to back it up by going to the records to try to put some meat on the bones of the story. That's one thing that I wanted to talk about as far as the research. And we kick around the census information a lot, in order to go back. It's always something that once you get your information together and you find these people, you have to always keep that information at hand so you can refer to it as you go back into the records to try to find. You got something to add on that?
Oh yeah, and then too with the census, because they do list like the marital status, because sometimes you may find that a woman is listed as as widowed, and she's not actually widowed.
Yeah, how about that one?
And she's not actually, because I ran into that of my, third great grandmother. She's listed as being divorced on the 1880 census. I'm like, I gotta go find the death record for my third great grandfather. And so I was going to look for his death record, but I didn't find a death record. But what I found was a marriage record to another woman.
And we do
so I was
find
like,
that, and we do find
I bet she wasn't widowed. They weren't together.
And in some cases, we find that they were never married in the first place.
Yeah.
But as a census taker plays a huge part in collecting this information, and quite often they were compassionate. They were compassionate, and so rather than just say this woman had 5 kids and she was never married, they would say she was a widow, she was a widow, or she was divorced, so as not to just put her out there like she's 5 kids out of wedlock. And during that time period in particular, it's probably not much different now, but they're not judging her for her status, if you will. So learning how to read the records correctly and what questions you should ask about those records that you're looking at is what we want you to take note of. And so we have a lot of things to cover, and we're also going to talk about records that you need to look at. Since we're on documentation, we're going to talk about what else you can find. Adrian mentioned just a minute or two ago about the military records and information that you can glean from those military records with National Archives and what they have available for you when you request the military files on a soldier. I, for one, and I've mentioned this a few times throughout the years of programming, when I requested information on my Ridley side for research, I knew that my great-grandfather's brother was a military person. He was in the Illinois 29th Infantry. And I found that out quite by accident, working away one day in the library when I saw this book on colored soldiers from Illinois during the Civil War. Brand new book at the time, still on the rack to be processed into the collection. And I go, Illinois, that's interesting, but I see that they're black soldiers that they're talking about, the U.S. colored troops. And I pick up that book and I go to the index to see what's in there. And then I also look, at references in the back, and lo and behold, there was this John Ridley, and I go, what are the odds? What are the odds, that this could be this person? And hot dang, that's exactly who it was. There he was, written up in a brand new book that was being published that year and put on the shelves here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And that was my great-grandfather's brother, which gave a nice, huge paragraph about his service in the military. I knew from the census records that he had been in the military, but to turn around and look that book straight in the face on a given day, to be able to find out everything. Well, when I requested the information on him from the National Archives, there was like 183 pages of documentation about him, his family, which also included my great-grandfather, and other family members, other soldiers that he served with, some of which also ended up living in Fort Wayne. It was crazy. It was crazy. And you've had a similar experience, have you not?
Yeah, because I have several Civil War veterans in my lineage, and yeah, those pension files are a wealth of information. Because I did take a trip to the National Archive, I think in 2001, which I pulled a couple of my mud ancestors who were Civil War veterans. I pulled their pension files, but I didn't know, I just thought those were the only ones. But continuing my research, I found out that my other third great-grandfather that was also a veteran, and my fourth great-grandfather, two of them were Civil War veterans. So I was able to get their pension files, but those pension files give you a wealth of information. Like in the case of my fourth great-grandfather, Austin, in his pension records, his wife, Lucy, she was given a deposition, and so she began to list, about her most intimate friends, and she said that she had one of her most close intimate friends, their close intimate friends was Logan Hamilton, which was her brother, and he now resides in Topeka, Kansas. And I about dropped my jaw because I lived in Topeka, Kansas for 6 months, and that's where my mom and my uncles, they had lived, and I was there not knowing that, we had ties to Topeka, Kansas.
Right.
And it's like, so I was able to go research him in Topeka, and then that's when I found out that his son, G.W. Hamilton, was the first African-American mortician in Topeka, and he had a funeral home and such, so I was able to find a lot of newspaper articles and things about that, and so I was able to add on to the tree because I didn't know anything about, Lucy. And then also, in that pension file, she also gave in her deposition, she said that she was born a Hamilton, but then she was given down, and then she became a Clarkson, then she was passed down again to Benjamin Hayden, but she didn't take on the Hayden surname, she kept Clarkson. So when she got married under Lucy Clarkson, but she told how she was passed down, through the family.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay.
Something that a lot of people get stumped on more often than they know, because of the name changes that take place. A daughter gets married, and so the enslaved person has to take on the surname of the head of the household, which is that man, and no longer is that under that name.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before in other presentations, where there was a lady who had belonged to 5 different people. None of them were her parents. That's from what she remembered from her bondage, because she, of course, was born into bondage. But when emancipation came, and she married a person that she actually was in love with, and sometime shortly afterwards, he did pass away, and she was by herself once again. And she woke up one day and said, I don't like that last name. I loved him, but I don't like that last name. So I'm going to now go by the name of, like, Washington, you know, after President Washington. I like that. She liked the way it sounds, so she changed her name to that. And anybody who would have ever thought, if they didn't have a family connection to it, would have come across that name Washington and thought it was her. She had like 5 different surnames that she had carried from bondage into marriage, and then she picked up that 6th one because that's what she liked. There's all kinds of things that can throw you off when you're doing this research, and that is gospel right there. Now, in doing that, there's so many other, we often talk about the out-of-the-box research, but I'm going to pause right here and talk about some other things. And some of those other things have to do with understanding history, understanding what's taking place in history. We have a lot of books. Oh my gosh, there's just so many books that are beneficial for your reading while you're doing your research. And we're here now experiencing some things that make us think about another time and another place. How, why has it changed? How does it affect us today when we're out here doing this research, trying to come up with the answers? And the big one that I hear more than I want to is, what does it matter? What's the point in doing it? And it breaks my heart, you know, that people don't understand why one should research this. I was online the other day and came across a post on Facebook, and I'm sure other people have seen it as well. And they were there was bantering via the messages on Facebook about what reparations means to African American people. What's the validity of it? Why should they be looking at it? Why should they even expect it? You know, how come the Irish can't get it? How come the Chinese don't get it? How come German people, you know, who came here as servants? And they were talking about all of the enslaved European people in the United States. Wow. You know, I looked at a lot of statistics over these numbers of years that I've been doing this work, and looking at just different states and who's listed. There is a sincere difference between being an enslaved person, an indentured servant, a bonded domestic worker. What are some of the other terms that they use? I think, and just being a house servant. There were immigrants that came, and people went to Castle Gardens and the Ellis Island, and there were women who had managed to get here, didn't have money, needed a job, and they were hired to be for child care as a cook, as a maid, this, that, and the other. But they had to have clean clothes. They have to maybe even get some training, and they were charged for those services that were provided to them in order for them to be gainfully employed. Indentured, okay? Indentured, which means that you're going to work for a certain amount of time to pay back what's been invested in you for you to be able to do what it is that they need you to do. They had tricks in the game. Make sure of that. They had tricks in the game. But the key was that ultimately they had an option to be free. They were never classified as enslaved. And what we did find is, after many of these people became familiar with the lay of the land, they could disappear. They could disappear into the mountains of Appalachia, get on a boat, head to Canada, get on a wagon train and head west, and life was grand. An option. That's not to say they didn't get sought after, hunted down like a dog would go after a raw piece of meat in some cases, depending on the attitude of the enslaver. There's a difference, people. Not because I want it to be, not because I say so. There was a difference. And the opportunity existed for freedom. It's, I've talked to people about Kentucky had a reputation of bringing in Irish women in particular in order to have them bear mulatto children. And they were coupled together with enslaved African American men to create those mulatto children. And they were primarily looking for the girls. If you do some history research, you'll find out them talking about them, they're referred to as fancy girls. And these poor little girls were sold into houses of ill repute down the river, down the Mississippi River into New Orleans and other parts of the country where they had these houses of ill repute, and these girls were bred just for those houses. And unfortunately, and I do mean that with the utmost sincerity, unfortunately, the Irish women that were used for that production, they were indentured. And to me, that is slavery in those circumstances in particular. And I can see why people would say that. But again, the opportunity existed for freedom. And they could easily have been found in favor of some European man that said, I want Sally. How much you want for her? And could get her. But that's not different than European history overall. These are things that people have to understand. There was no control because African American women were made to do whatever, and far too many times they didn't survive it. Far too many times they did not survive it. And there are things that are written about these things, and you should look into it. So that's one kind of thing that we can talk about, research, prove. We can prove it. We can prove it. And we often forget to look at certain records like that. And they write about a lot of stuff. We're moving through the census records, and we get into, let's talk Jim Crow conversation. We have a book here that I used to sell books, and I would collect those books for a variety of topics that people should know and understand. Without Sanctuary here, this book is a heartbreaker. It's a heartbreaker because it tells the raw truth about lynching in America. The raw truth about lynching in America. Without Sanctuary is a lynching photography of America, lynching photography of America, where it actually shows pictorials of the horrific lynchings that took place throughout this country over a large period of time. We're here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I've mentioned this before, but the lynching in 1930 in Marion, Indiana is right on the cover of this book. Wow. It's overwhelming. Some of it is hard to digest. And the very idea that this is a social gathering, and let me reiterate that for you, a social gathering whereupon they have sold cotton candy, soda pops, and ice cream for people to gather around to watch such a thing take place. Far too often, these acts took place without proper investigation, lack of proof, hot-headed people who just wanted to do what they wanted to do about something that they did not even bother to be informed about. And was it worth this sort of savagery, this sort of disrespect? And you teach your children to lick ice cream cones and slurp on cotton candy and watch somebody hang to death and then mutilate the body and sell off parts of the body in order to gain profit? This is not a book for the faint of heart. It has most assuredly become more popular here of late than when it was initially published in 2003. The authors of this production, the names of the individuals: James Allen, Hilton Als, Congressman John Lewis, Leon Litworth. These are all individuals that contributed to this. And whether you know it or not, I mean, it was commonplace for people to mail out postcards with these images on the postcards. Hey, Mom, look what I did today. On this day, I was there with Jane and so, and boy, we got us one. And it was a blast. That type of verbiage, that type of communication, that sort of nonchalant mentality towards the destruction of somebody else's life, and they weren't even sure they were guilty. They weren't even sure that they were guilty. And some of the things that they were guilty of certainly did not require death by lynching. We got a lot of things going on in the country right now. We got a lot of things going on, and lynching happens. It just doesn't happen quite like this. Mm-hmm. And it's the same chocolate in a different wrapper. That sound about right, Adrian? Mm-hmm. So this book has been hard to come by here of late. It's a tearjerker, unless you're a beast of some sort. And I'll pray for you, whoever you are. I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway, just in case, because I know there's people out there like that. But understanding what's been written and how it was treated, both politically, socially, mm-hmm. spiritually, and look where we are today. Mm-hmm. What impact has that sort of mentality and behavior had on how we're living today? If those children were eating their cotton candy and laughing with mom and dad, oh, look at his eyes or look at his feet, mm-hmm. what did they learn? How do you erase that from a child's mind? Mm-hmm. This, the Marion, Indiana incident, there were three boys involved in this situation. One was completely and totally innocent, but they were getting ready to lynch him. And his name was James Cameron. And the sheriff mandated that they leave him be because he didn't have anything to do with it. He was blessed to be able to live a very long life, a good life, we'll say it like that. And he had the first Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And as I said, James Cameron, but they had to take him and put him in another prison in Indiana, an innocent child taken, and I think he was 14 when all this happened. And all he did was ask for a ride home because it was dark out. and he ended up being locked up with these two guys who were involved in a robbery, okay, and then another European individual tried to rob them and ended up getting killed. So 1930, there's a lot of people that may listen to this airing, and they were here in 1930, you know, and they may remember at some point in time. But I can remember when I heard about it and reflected on it, I go, oh my gosh, my dad was 16 years old when this happened. And his aunt lived in Marion, Indiana, like about 4 blocks from where this lynching took place. You think about things differently. And yes, it's a part of genealogy. It's a part of genealogy, because what was the impact on the family at that time? And I can remember growing up not hearing about this stuff, but never thinking for 1 minute that such a thing could take place in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it was a huge article in our newspaper about it. But history having something to do with it. That book to my immediate left, right beside Adrian, A Lynching in the Heartland, by James Madison. He's a professor at Indiana University who wrote about the legal, social significance of this exact lynching of which I have referred. Okay. Then the flip side. Do you have some things like that you want to share, Adrian? I don't want to hog up all of our time. We could do a part 2 on this anytime, right? You know? Is that the answer? Okay. On my far right here is another oldie but goodie, and when I talk about oldies but goodies, the miseducation of the Negro. Wow. Did you know? And we all, you know, a lot of people talk about this, but you know, I've known this for years and years and years. Let's start with spiritual miseducation. They had a special Bible for the slaves. Had a special Bible. Let me say that again. They made a special Bible for enslaved people. Oh my goodness. I remember the first time that I read this, and I'm like, how you do that? They got a direct message from God. And he said, oh, don't let them see that Bible. Give them this Bible. These are the things that you should let them see out of this Bible. But the primary reason for the special slave Bible was that enslaved people needed to know and accept the fact that they were, quote unquote, meant to be slaves. And they should embrace that, accept that, and be willing to suffer in that so that they could continue doing what the enslaver required of them without bucking the system. Oh my. And the sad part about it is the impact that it had on the enslaved people upon emancipation, when that was when many of them found out. That's not to say everybody, because they had slave ministers. And the slave ministers worked out of those Bibles, but they learned about the Bible and knew that there was stuff that was being withheld. Freedom did give a whole other twist, but there were a lot of people that got lost by the wayside, learning that the Bible that they had been told to accept was a Bible that allowed them to be destroyed in so many different ways. So miseducation of the Negro is not specifically targeted to the biblical side or the spiritual side, but it does refer to the education, the psychological, social education of African American people, and the impact that it had on the household as a family unit, on the education, academically speaking, for individuals, yes? And how do we work around all of this with all types of glass ceilings? And this is an oldie but goodie, but please believe the playbook is the same. What's required from the miseducation also addresses the education of the Negro. What changes were made? What changes took place? How has it impacted? We all know that Carter G. Woodson is the reason that we have Black History Month, along with W.E.B. Du Bois and a couple other people that involved. And so we're looking very closely at what is happening to us based on the education that's been, so to speak, forced on us, not acknowledging the contributions, the patents that were stolen, the in-depth labor that was forced in order to have a job. Those same jobs today, you have to, that blows my mind. I can't help it. You know, what you have to go to school for today in order to get $40, $50 an hour, they could send a slave up on that rafter and offer him a bowl of gruel at the end of the day. And then there's the emancipated slave, in order to have a shack with a roof over their head and be able to eat their own collard greens out their own backyard, so to speak. It's $50, $70 an hour. Come on. Got to stop and think about it. Really have to stop and think about it, because there's that word, reparations, people. Reparations. I'm going to leave it hang there. I can't help it. I'm going to leave it hang there. And that is a look at Carter G. Woodson's contribution to type of research you want to do in order to get a better feel for what's taking place in the time period that you're looking at in terms of the research and the censuses in the area that your family is in. What's going on in the community there? You might want to pick up a book, right?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to jump over it so that I can, the Watsons go to Birmingham. I bring that here because, oh, get that book stand. We missed a book. There's one, yeah. We missed a book. Let's pop that one up there so I can talk about that real quick in a minute, okay? The Watsons go to Birmingham. For those of you out there that haven't bothered to look into it, the Green Book. The Green Book. A Green Book is a travel guide that was made for, I didn't bring the book, I apologize, but you can always pull it up online. There's quite a bit that's been put out in the last 5 years in particular, as far as what the content of the Green Book was, in order for people, African American people, to travel the highways of these United States safely, avoiding sundown towns, abiding by sundown town rules and regulations, being able to survive highway travel without being imprisoned, attacked, beaten, or anything like that. How to do it safely and get where you gotta go. Where is it safe to sleep? Where is it safe to eat? Where can we get gas for your vehicle safely? And when to leave home so that you can pass through these sundown towns, where, when I say sundown towns, for those of you who don't know what I mean, is you come through that town or that county in some cases, but you gotta be out of that area by sundown. Otherwise, they did what they called, and you'll excuse me, nigger hunting, because that was a law that had been on the books. As a matter of fact, I actually think it's still there. It's a question of what's been done about it or how they apply it when it's convenient. So they would do things just because they could, because you were in that county and they got a sign that told you you had to be out by sundown. So if something happened, it's like, oops, too bad, you know, should have been gone. And so that guidebook is something that you might want to familiarize yourself, look and see what kinds of places. Fort Wayne is listed in that green book, and the places that were safe for you to shelter in or have a decent meal as you're coming through that area. And there's something else that comes to mind. I got to remember to mention that part when we towards the end here. I don't know if we're running out of time or not. But anyway, here we go. That is the story of the Watsons Go to Birmingham. And it's a great way to introduce children to understanding that how things have changed, because it's, you know, young people take a whole lot for granted. And they still do crazy stuff, whether you want to admit it or not. And we're in some very stressful times right now, people. We're in some very stressful times, and you and I both know it. Not because I said so, because that's what's happening. Then that brings us, anything you want to add to that, Adrian?
No, I was just thinking about the sundown towns that was in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Marion being one of them.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Martinsville, Elwood, Goshen. Or just to name them.
Kind of close to home, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. And you just kind of wonder, you know, what part of that is still hanging around? How does that affect certain traffic violations, if you will? How do they deal with you in that way? And since we have so much legal controversy taking place in our country, you got to ask yourself, when does the other shoe drop?
Oh, Decatur and Huntington.
You know, yeah. There's go ahead, say it out loud.
No, I was looking at Decatur and Huntington.
Yeah. And as a young person, oh no, I like you, but I don't think my daddy gonna let me come over there. You know, because you know, if I did, I certainly had to be picked up in a time where I had to get back home before it was dark. And that was something, because I learned from my father that was not a safe thing for me to do. So do I have remnants of that in my psyche when I travel? You bet your sweet baby I do.
I
Okay.
Google. Because I do a lot of traveling, so I Google.
You do a lot of traveling.
I said, what's the population in this
It's
city?
not funny, but it's like I laugh at myself in the sense that I think about it far too often in the vein that things have not changed that much. So that is something that I like to call to people's attention. The black tax. Oh my goodness. What does that mean? Well, I will tell you that it sort of goes into the vein of the rich get rich and the poor get poor. And in that respect, poor is poor. Red, yellow, black, or white. That's what that is, and that's what that is. That black tax, you know, the money that is collected from poor people, disenfranchised individuals over a whole, and the rights of individuals are not respected in any way, shape, or form. You need to read it. You need to read it. You need to understand how it holds us down, how it holds us back. And lack of understanding it is simply saying, oh, sure, let me do that. Let me do that for you. Oh, sure, take that. And I can accept that. No, you can't. No, you can't. I've referred to this book before. I'm going to, I don't know if we're running close to being out of time here, but I think that what's important is that you understand that it's infuriating, and the boldness of what the rich do to the poor to justify the abuse. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it at that because you need to understand. You need to understand how much we give up, how much they take that doesn't allow us to get ahead. Adrian, you have any final words or comments that you wanted to share here? Butt in anytime. You know, y'all have to excuse me. I could go on and on and on, sharing new things that I discover every day, remembering things that I have worked on throughout the years that need to be reminded.
I mean, there's just so much.
There is. We could do this. We could do sessions like this about 3 more times, maybe. Scratch the surface. What I do want to do right now, though, as you're listening, we have a couple of events coming up in the immediate near future so that you can join with the African American Genealogical Society. We have we're in partnership with the Indiana Landmarks Black Heritage Preservation Program. The Fort Wayne committee of that organization, in conjunction with supporting entities, will be doing a dedication of the at the Brewer Park on Pettit Street here in Fort Wayne. You can check us out on Facebook on that announcement. But we're going to, Roosevelt Barnes was the first black home builder allowed to do so in Fort Wayne, fought hard to get the right to do so as far as homes built in the Southern Heights area of Fort Wayne. We will be dedicating the marker for that and acknowledging individuals who are still in that addition on May 31st, mark your calendar, May 31st from 2 to 4 p.m. Also, we have another event coming up in June 21st. I believe that's absolutely correct. Again, check us out on Facebook. We will be introducing a program on William Warfield. And he is a significant entrepreneur of African American heritage here in Fort Wayne. Mark your calendars. We'll be back to talk to you about those in the immediate near future. Again, check us out on Facebook. And I thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
And Adrian, good to be back on set.
Yeah.
And African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne, thank you.
Someplace deep inside, you know I feel a haunting. It's there in every way. I feel the ancient calling. I hear it in the drums. I write it in my melodies. I feel it when I sing.